If you're new here, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because today's story is about fear, power, and a truth the galaxy never expected. When the Galactic Council declared the most terrifying predator in existence unstoppable, only to watch humans give it a ridiculous nickname. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this unfolds. The council chamber was thick with tension, the vaulted ceilings echoing with murmurs of panic. Representatives of 50 worlds had gathered, their colors and forms a shifting tide of flesh, fur, and scales. At the heart of the circular dais, a hollow projection burned bright, an image that silenced even the most argumentative species. It was a grainy recording, but the horror was clear. A beast, massive and sinewed like living stone, charged across a battlefield of smoking craters. Its claws tore armored mechs apart like paper. Its roar was so deep it shook the audio, and the soldiers caught in its path simply vanished, reduced to smears of red and mangled metal. Ambassador Telrax of the Sylvari tried to steady his quivering voice. This thing destroyed 3 battalions in under 7 minutes? Not one survivor. His translucent skin flushed dark with fear, each word spilling into the chamber like a funeral toll. The projection shifted to another recording, a fleet engagement. Dozens of starships fired energy lances into the beast as it moved on the ground below. The monster did not fall. It leapt. Against gravity, against logic, it soared like a missile into the air, colliding with a carrier-class vessel. The ship cracked open like fruit, spilling fire into the night sky. Gasps rippled through the chamber. The presiding chancellor, an elder of the Thren, slammed his staff. Enough. We have all seen the reports. His voice was gravel, his many eyes dim. This creature is beyond measure. Every effort at extermination has failed. Entire fleets reduced to scrap. Entire worlds now abandoned. At the edge of the chamber, one figure stood tall and rigid, Commander Kael Draven. His skin bore the pale hue of the Droskan people, but across his chest were scars deep and ragged, earned from close combat with the very thing the council debated. Unlike the others, Kael did not tremble. His silence was heavy, a grim weight pressing down on those near him. The Chancellor gestured toward him. You survived the Predator's onslaught, Commander. Speak. Kael's jaw tightened, his voice low and precise, as though every word cost him pain. What you call a predator is more than a beast. It is strategy wrapped in flesh. It hunts with patience. It stalks with intelligence. It learns. Every trap we laid, it tore apart. Every weapon, it adapted against. I lost an entire regiment under my command. I saw soldiers firing until their weapons burned out. I saw it take their screams as fuel. A murmur swept across the chamber, but Kael's voice only grew colder. You ask me how to stop it. I tell you, there is no stopping it. It is the end of armies. The end of worlds. The council can debate until these walls collapse, but it will not change the truth. We faced a nightmare and the nightmare won. A heavy silence settled, broken only by the faint hum of the projection as it replayed the carnage. Some delegates averted their gaze. Others stared with unblinking horror, as though willing themselves to absorb every detail so they might prepare for the inevitable. Finally, the Chancellor raised his staff again. Then let it be declared. The creature of Threxos 7 is classified as unstoppable. No further expeditions shall be launched to its world. No fleets wasted. Let the beast rot upon its hunting ground. The chamber erupted in relief and fear all at once. Relief that they need not fight again, fear that the monster still lived, breathing somewhere in the jungles of a cursed world. The decree was not victory, it was surrender. Kael remained standing as the voices swirled around him. His eyes, cold steel beneath the council's golden light, were fixed not on the Chancellor but on the hollow projection still looping before them. He remembered the sound, the deep, guttural growl that had chased him through the shattered ruins of his last stand. He remembered the way the air vibrated as if reality itself feared the creature. His scarred hand twitched at the phantom of a blade, a weapon he no longer carried. And yet, buried deep within the recordings, something unexpected flickered, a sound that none of the others seemed to notice. A distortion. A faint noise layered beneath the roars and screams. To Kael it almost sounded like a human voice. Not terrified. Not panicked. But amused. The thought unsettled him more than the memories. As the chamber continued its descent into argument, some demanding planetary quarantine, others whispering about new weapons, Kael kept his gaze fixed on the playback. He magnified the final seconds of one recording. The predator stood atop a ridge, its chest heaving, blood and ash dripping from its claws. And there, faint but undeniable, came that sound again. A laugh. Not from the beast but near it, Human, certainly human. Cale's throat tightened. Impossible, he muttered. But the seed of dread had already sprouted. If humans had been there when the predator carved through fleets, if humans had survived where entire armies perished, then perhaps the Council's declaration of unstoppable meant little. For Cale knew one thing about humans, a truth many in the Council preferred not to admit: they had a habit of surviving the impossible. And if the predator had not killed them, if it had allowed them near. He pushed the thought aside before it could form, but it lingered, gnawing at the edges of reason. The chamber's voices rose, echoing like a storm around him, but Cale no longer listened. His scars itched with memory, his mind replaying that faint, irreverent sound. A laugh. It was the last thing he had expected to hear alongside the end of worlds. And though the Council declared the Predator's planet forbidden and its threat eternal, Cale Draven could not shake the certainty that somewhere, somehow, someone had walked beside the beast, and lived. On the human frontier, where the edge of colonized space brushed against the wilderness of the unknown, Captain Elias Ward walked through the dusty streets of Outpost Halverin with the casual gait of a man who had seen too much to be impressed by anything small. His broad shoulders carried the weight of years spent in Earth's special forces, his dark hair streaked with the silver of battles survived. He was known among the settlers as a quiet man, one who fixed his own equipment, lent a hand when the power grids failed, and rarely raised his voice. But whenever he stepped into town, the entire street seemed to empty, eyes pulling to one place behind him. The shadow padded at his side like a living storm. It was immense, furred in thick black layers shot through with scars that glowed faintly where old wounds had fused with alien energy. His teeth could shear steel. Its claws could crack titanium. The ground trembled with its stride. Children peeked from doorways and scurried back inside, while seasoned traders and grizzled miners gave the creature a wide berth, whispering oaths beneath their breath. To them it was death incarnate. To Elias it was simply Fluffy. "Stay close," Elias murmured. The monster's ears twitched, and with a low chuff that shook dust from the windows, it settled into a slower pace. When Elias stopped at the outpost canteen, Fluffy sat at the door like a hound, massive jaws opening in a yawn that revealed a mouthful of blades. Inside, the canteen's owner, a wiry woman named Lauren, raised a brow. "Ward, I told you before. That thing of yours makes my customers nervous." "They'll get used to him," Elias replied, unbothered as he poured himself a mug of the bitter frontier brew. "He's gentler than he looks." A loud crash outside silenced the room. Someone had dropped a crate, startled by the predator's curious snout nudging too close. The unfortunate worker scrambled away, his screams echoing until he vanished around the corner. Fluffy tilted its head, confused, then gave a rumbling huff and sprawled across the dust with the weight of a collapsed building. Elias didn't even look up from his mug. The settlers called him insane. They said no one sane would bring that beast within 100 kilometers of a populated colony. Some whispered it was a weapon he had tamed, others that he had made some infernal pact. The truth was far stranger. It had begun on Threxos 7, when Elias was still an active soldier. His unit had been deployed on a mission that was never supposed to involve combat, surveying the ruins left behind by alien armies who had tried and failed to contain the predator. The reports they'd been given said nothing lived there, only wreckage. They were wrong. The memory came back to him in fragments. The jungle air hot and thick, the ground wet with blood not their own, the sudden ambush when the predator came out of the trees. His squad had been shredded in moments, their rifles useless, their voices lost to the roar of the beast. Elias remembered the shockwave of a swipe that sent him tumbling into a ravine, his body broken, his weapon lost. He should have died there, beneath the canopy of a nightmare world. But death never came. The predator stalked him, circling the hollow where he lay. Its eyes glowed like twin embers in the dark, intelligent and cruel. It could have ended him with a flick of its claws. Instead it paused. Elias, delirious and bleeding, reached into his pack with trembling fingers. Not for a weapon, he had none left, but for the last ration bar he carried. He tore it open and shoved it across the dirt between them. The beast sniffed, snarled, then snapped it up with a single bite. The sound it made after was not the roar of a monster but something closer to satisfaction. A low, almost playful rumble. Elias had laughed despite the blood in his mouth. "Guess you're hungry too." The bond began there, inexplicable and fragile. When rescue finally came, the predator did not flee. It followed. Against every instinct of survival, against every warning of his commanders, Elias allowed it to shadow him back to camp. At first his men had raised their weapons, screaming in terror. But the beast did not attack. It stood by Elias, and when anyone approached with hostility, it growled low until they backed away. Elias should have been court-martialed, but by then the outpost had already witnessed what the council had called impossible. The predator listened to him. It stayed when he commanded, hunted when he gestured, and returned when he called. The soldiers began to whisper the nickname half in jest, half in disbelief: Fluffy. Elias leaned into the absurdity, calling it aloud, until even the beast seemed to recognize the sound as its name. Now years later the bond was unshakable. Elias rubbed the scarred hide at Fluffy's flank as he stepped back into the dust-filled street. The predator leaned into the touch with a rumble that made nearby windows rattle. To everyone else it was a nightmare. To him it was family. But word traveled fast across the frontier. Traders carried stories beyond the colony. Smugglers spread rumors in backwater cantinas. Tales of the human who walked beside the beast that had slaughtered fleets began to ripple outward, reaching ears that did not belong to settlers or soldiers. The council, still trembling from its last decree, could not ignore the whispers. Back in Outpost Halverin, Elias leaned on his porch as the sun dipped low, painting the desert in gold. Fluffy sprawled across the ground like a collapsed fortress, eyes half-lidded in contentment, tail twitching in slow, heavy thuds. Elias sipped from a dented flask, his gaze scanning the horizon. He had survived war, survived loneliness, and against every law of nature found loyalty in the most dangerous creature known to the stars. Yet beneath the calm he sensed the storm approaching. The galaxy feared what slept at his side. And fear, Elias knew, never remained quiet for long. The chamber was in uproar. Reports had spread across the council like wildfire, carried by frightened merchants and intercepted transmissions. The predator they had condemned to isolation was no longer confined to its cursed world. It walked under the command of a human. The very idea was blasphemy to some, nightmare to others. Commander Kale Draven stood at the center of the chaos, arms folded like steel girders across his chest. He listened to the panicked accusations, the demands for immediate retaliation, the whispered terror that humanity had accomplished the impossible. When the Chancellor finally brought order with a thunderous strike of his staff, Kale spoke in a voice that cut through the chamber like a blade. You have all seen the reports. This creature obeys a human. That is not partnership. That is contagion. If it spreads, there will be no force left in the stars to stop them. Some agreed instantly, desperate to act before the threat grew. Others resisted, arguing that sending more armies against the predator was madness. But Kale's words carried weight, forged from scars and memory. When he insisted that the council had no choice but to dispatch hunters, the silence that followed was reluctant but complete. Specialists were gathered from across the member races. Elite assassins, war beasts, and stealth craft meant for targeted killing. The mission was not conquest. It was eradication. The council's order was clear: eliminate the human and the monster that followed him. Far from the chamber, in the dust-stained calm of Outpost Halverin, Elias Ward felt the change before he saw it. The horizon had been quiet for weeks, filled only with the rhythm of settlers and the steady thump of Fluffy's tail. But when the sky split with a faint streak of descending ships, his instincts tightened. Soldiers knew the scent of danger long before the first shot was fired. He rose from his porch, setting aside his flask. Fluffy's ears flicked, nostrils flaring as the creature's head lifted from the ground. A growl rumbled low in its chest, vibrating through the dirt. Elias laid a steadying hand on its scarred hide. Easy, boy. Let's see who's calling. The first hunters revealed themselves at dusk. Figures draped in chameleon armor melted from the shadows, their weapons humming with lethal intent. They moved like predators themselves, circling the settlement with precision. Settlers bolted doors and powered down lights, whispering prayers as the air thickened with dread. One stepped forward, voice filtered through a translator mask. Human Elias Ward. By order of the Galactic Council, you are charged with harboring a threat to all known life. Relinquish the beast to us or face eradication. Elias did not flinch. He stood in the dust with the calm of a man who had already buried too many comrades. You don't want to do this, he said evenly. You've seen what happens when you point weapons at him. The lead hunter raised a blade that crackled with energy. Then let us see if it bows to you when the council commands otherwise. The world exploded. Fluffy moved with a speed that defied his colossal frame, a blur of muscle and fury. One swipe of its claws tore the hunter's blade apart and sent the armored figure crumpling into the dirt. The others opened fire, energy bolts searing through the night, but the predator twisted between them with terrifying grace. Each impact against its hide barely slowed it. Each roar shook the ground like thunder. Elias drew his sidearm, firing with precision not at the hunters but at the traps they tried to set. Mines, drones, containment nets. He shot them out of the air before they could ensnare his companion. Every movement was instinct honed by war, man and beast moving in unspoken synchrony. The battle tore across the settlement. Fluffy ripped apart machines designed to restrain it, crushing metal as though it were paper. Hunters screamed through their translators, cursing the council's command as one by one they fell beneath claws and teeth. Dust clouded the streets, fire sparked against the night, and through it all Elias's voice rang out sharp and steady. Fluffy. Left. The beast obeyed without hesitation, slamming its massive bulk into a cluster of assassins trying to flank them. Screams were cut short in the crunch of bone and armor. When the dust finally settled, silence reigned. The few hunters who had survived scrambled back into the shadows, their retreat leaving behind wreckage and blood. The outpost was scarred but still standing. Fluffy stood at Elias's side, hide smoking from plasma burns, chest heaving, eyes blazing with untamed fire. Yet when Elias laid a hand against his shoulder, the predator sank low to the ground with a huff, like a hound awaiting praise. Elias knelt, brushing ash from its muzzle. Good boy. To any who watched, the image was madness. A nightmare beast kneeling for affection, obedient as a pet. But to Elias it was truth. A bond forged not by chains or fear but by something older, something deeper. From the shadows of the ruins, one figure had lingered longer than the rest. Commander Cale Draven, called back into the field despite his warnings, had witnessed the slaughter with his own eyes. He had seen the predator rend through hunters that the council prized above armies, seen the human guide it with nothing more than voice and touch. As he watched, his scarred hand tightened on the hilt of his blade. Terror and fascination warred in his chest. The council had been wrong to declare the beast unstoppable. It was worse than unstoppable. It was loyal. And not to them. Elias met his gaze across the distance, calm and unflinching. There was no boast in his stance, no arrogance, only the quiet certainty of a man who knew the line he would not cross. If you come for him again, Elias called, his voice carrying through the smoking streets, you'll have to come through me first. Cale said nothing. His silence was louder than a roar. He turned back toward the shadows, his mind already reeling with the consequences. For the council, the nightmare was no longer the beast itself. It was the human who had tamed it. The aftermath of the battle left Outpost Halvarin scarred but alive. Smoke rose in thin columns from the ruins of containment drones and scorched vehicles, and the scent of burned metal lingered like a stubborn memory. Settlers emerged cautiously from hiding, whispering tales of the human who had walked beside the galaxy's deadliest predator and survived. Their eyes widened at the sight of Elias Ward, leaning against a fractured wall with Fluffy sprawled at his feet, chest heaving, tail thumping softly against the ground. Elias surveyed the wreckage without alarm. He had fought worse, seen worse, and lived worse. To him, this was routine, an ordinary day at the edge of human space. Fluffy nuzzled against his side, leaning with the weight of something half apex predator, half companion. Elias's hand scratched the thick hide between its shoulders, and the creature's rumble vibrated through the stones beneath their feet. Far above, council analysts scrambled to process the recordings. The footage of the battle had been transmitted before the dust settled, and the reactions were catastrophic. Scientists, strategists, and xenobiologists pored over every frame, unable to reconcile the monster's intelligence with the human at its side. The data defied expectations. Neural scans, behavioral models, and combat simulations failed to predict what they had just witnessed. Impossible, muttered Dr. Renlick, a Sylvari xenopsychologist. His translucent skin pulsed with frustration. The predator is responding to human behavioral cues, social bonding patterns we've never observed. It's listening to him. Not just listening, countered General Thero, the Draken tactician. His multiple eyes narrowed. It's obeying. It's coordinating. That human is controlling a creature that could have obliterated us all. In the shadows of the chamber, Cale Draven clenched his fists. His instincts screamed in conflict. The council had trained him to fear the beast. He had lived through its attacks. And yet here it was tamed, obedient to a human. The realization gnawed at him, unsettled him more than any wound or scar ever had. Back on Halvarin, Elias crouched to examine Fluffy's claws, scorched and chipped from the skirmish. You okay? He asked, a gentle undertone in his voice. The predator tilted its head, eyes glowing faintly, and nudged Elias's hand in confirmation. No growl, no roar, just trust. He remembered the first day he had met Fluffy, when the predator had torn through his squad with lethal precision, and yet had spared him when offered sustenance. That moment had forged a connection beyond language or species, a bond built on survival, respect, and mutual recognition of strength. It was a truth the Council could not comprehend. Sometimes the greatest power was trust, not terror. Fluffy's intelligence, once underestimated, became evident in ways beyond combat. It observed, learned, and anticipated. It responded not only to commands but to the subtleties of Elias's expressions, the tilt of his head, the cadence of his voice. When hunters or intruders approached, it did not merely attack, it assessed, it strategized. In that, Elias saw not only a weapon but a partner. Word spread across human settlements and colonies faster than any fleet could travel. The story of Elias and Fluffy became legend. Pilots spoke of seeing a hulking shadow cut through ambushes with precision, guided by a man who never drew a wrong breath. Traders whispered of a predator that obeyed a human, loyal as a dog, cunning as a commander. And all the while, the Council scrambled to understand. Dr. Renlick and her team debated furiously, poring over behavioral matrices and neurological scans. "This bond," she said, voice trembling, "suggests the predator's responses are triggered by empathy patterns, human empathy. It recognizes the leader, trusts the leader, and adapts its predatory instincts to align with him. That is unprecedented." General Thero slammed his hand on the console. "It means humanity has turned what we declared unstoppable into a weapon that listens. If humans can command what we feared, then no system, no fleet, no defensive line is safe." The Council underestimated them. Cale Draven remained silent, his thoughts turning inward. He had once seen the predator rip through battalions, had felt its power strike at the core of his confidence. Now he saw it kneeling before Elias, rolling onto its back to expose its belly like a loyal hound, and he realized the scale of his misjudgment. Humans did not conquer by brute force alone. They tamed, they reasoned, they bonded, and through that they made the impossible possible. On Halvarin, Elias sensed the eyes of the galaxy turning toward him. The predator by his side did not share in human pride, yet it was a living testament to it. Elias walked through the settlement, greeting settlers with a nod, Fluffy lumbering close enough to draw gasps from those who had never seen such a creature alive, much less tamed. He did not boast. He did not brag. The display itself was enough. When night fell, the settlement quieted. Stars burned overhead in the clear sky, alien constellations twinkling like distant fires. Elias crouched by Fluffy's side, tracing the jagged scars across its flank, each one a memory of survival, each one a story untold. The predator's breath steamed in the cold, and its eyes met his with a depth that required no words. "People think we're a weapon," Elias said softly. "But we're more than that. We're a team." Fluffy gave a low, approving rumble. Elias smiled faintly, the curve of his lips catching the starlight. Together they had survived impossible odds. Together they would continue to do so. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Council's debates had shifted. They no longer argued merely about how to destroy the predator, they argued about the humans themselves. What kind of species could tame a creature the galaxy feared? What kind of soldiers could walk alongside a living nightmare and remain unscathed? Cale Draven's report was recalled, reviewed, and dissected. Each word painted humans not as fragile or limited, but as something to fear, something to respect. And within that fear, a grudging admiration emerged. Humans had taken what the Council could not and made it their own. They had transformed the unstoppable into the obedient, the terrifying into the loyal. And in doing so they had rewritten the rules of the galaxy. As dawn approached, Elias and Fluffy moved to the outskirts of Halvarin, scanning the horizon. No more hunters had appeared, but the threat had not vanished. The Council would not forget. Other worlds would come seeking answers, seeking control, seeking to claim what humans had bonded with and tamed. Elias knelt once more beside Fluffy, running his fingers along the curve of its massive jaw. "We've got a long road ahead," he murmured. The predator rested its massive head against his shoulder, rumbling in acknowledgement. Beyond the stars, the galaxy waited, curious, fearful, unprepared for what had just emerged from the wilderness of Threxos 7. A human and his predator. Unstoppable not because of weapons or fleets, but because of trust, intelligence, and loyalty. And for the first time, Cale Draven understood what the Council could not yet admit. Sometimes the most dangerous force in the universe was not the predator, but the species that could command it. The battle had been won, but the war of recognition, of fear, and of survival, was only beginning. And somewhere in the darkness, the next move awaited, one that would challenge both predator and human in ways the galaxy had never witnessed. The council chamber was quieter than it had ever been. The usual clamor of debate and accusation had been replaced by a tense, expectant silence. Word of Elias Ward and Fluffy had reached them in full, recorded, verified, and impossible to ignore. Kale Draven stood at the center, watching the humans approach through the holoscreen with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Every step Elias took toward the chamber seemed to carry the weight of the galaxy itself. The doors parted, revealing Elias in the dust-streaked uniform of a man who had survived the impossible. Fluffy followed without hesitation, its massive bulk dwarfing the tallest council members, its claws clicking against the polished floors. The Predator's eyes scanned the chamber with a calm intelligence, aware of the room's tension, aware of the judgments, aware of the fear. The Chancellor rose from his dais, staff trembling in his grip. "Captain Ward," he said, voice brittle with uncertainty. "You bring that creature here?" Elias's gaze swept the room, taking in every alien eye, every trembling hand. "I bring the truth," he said simply. His calm contrasted sharply with the murmurs of panic around him. "You called it unstoppable. I call it Fluffy." A wave of incredulous gasps spread across the chamber. Some council members covered their faces, others whispered prayers in alien tongues. Kale Draven's jaw tightened. He had seen the Predator in battle. He had seen it obey a human. And yet, watching it now, kneeling beside its companion with nothing more than a tilt of its head, he felt a cold unease settle in his chest. The council demanded proof, demanded control. "Captain Ward," the Chancellor said, his many eyes narrowing, "we require demonstration. Show that your pet is manageable, or we will be forced to take action." Elias nodded. He took a step forward, speaking in a calm, commanding tone. "Fluffy, roll over." The Predator obeyed instantly, sprawling onto its massive back, legs flailing in the air, tail thumping against the floor like the pulse of a drum. The sound reverberated across the chamber, a combination of awe and disbelief filling every corner. Aliens leaned back in horror, expecting violence, only to see the creature exposing its belly with the docility of a hound awaiting affection. "Impossible," muttered General Thero. "This is impossible." Elias knelt beside Fluffy, scratching between the ridges of its shoulder blades. "You see a monster," he said softly, voice carrying across the room. "I see loyalty. I see intelligence. I see a being that chooses to follow me not out of fear but out of trust. That's why we survive." The Predator rumbled in response, eyes half closed, yet scanning the room with the precision of a soldier assessing threats. Every council member felt it, an unspoken warning, a silent assertion of power. Yet despite the danger it radiated, there was an undeniable warmth, a bond that defied expectation. Kale Draven stepped forward, his hands gripping the edge of a console. This changes everything. All the simulations, all the projections, we were wrong. Humanity does not simply survive. It commands what we cannot even begin to understand." Elias did not reply. He merely extended a hand toward the council, inviting them to see reason. "You fear what you cannot control. That is the weakness of your species. Power without understanding is empty. But when you respect it, when you acknowledge it, it becomes something greater than fear. That is what humanity does." Fluffy shifted slightly, placing its massive head against Elias's shoulder, emitting a low rumble that seemed to echo through the chamber. It was a simple gesture, but the message was clear. Cross this line and you will feel the consequences. Yet no hostility was directed at Elias. The Predator's loyalty was absolute, and in that, the council could see the impossible reality. The Chancellor's hands shook, staff quivering. He had faced countless threats, yet none like this. None that obeyed a human. None that could have destroyed fleets and yet chosen to kneel before a single man. He could feel the balance of power shifting beneath his feet, a galaxy-wide revelation manifesting in a single chamber. Elias's voice cut through the tension once more. "You declared the Predator unstoppable. I call it Fluffy. The difference is not in the creature, it is in how it is understood. Fear is easy. Respect is earned. And loyalty cannot be forced. It must be chosen." The council members, long accustomed to asserting control through fear, stared in silence. The galaxy's most terrifying predator sprawled at Elias's side, no weapon drawn, no claws raised, yet commanding the room more fully than any fleet ever could. Kale Draven, scarred and weary, finally spoke aloud. "It is not the monster that terrifies me anymore. It is the human who commands it." Elias stood, brushing the dust from his uniform. He looked across the room, every word measured and deliberate. We are not conquerors. We are survivors. And sometimes, surviving means understanding what cannot be conquered. That is the strength of humanity. A faint rumble passed through Fluffy, a subtle thump of its massive tail against the floor, like punctuation at the end of a sentence the council could not yet comprehend. The chamber held its breath. Aliens who had once scoffed now reevaluated everything they thought they knew about life, loyalty, and power. The chancellor lowered his staff slowly, eyes wide. Then, what do you propose? Elias smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth lifting with quiet certainty. I propose you watch and learn. Humanity does not need your permission to survive. We do not need your fleets to enforce control. We do what is necessary, and we do it together. Fluffy rose to its feet, towering above the tallest council members, then leaned down to press its head against Elias's side. It rumbled again, not a roar, not a threat, but a sound of complete alignment, a living testament to the bond between human and predator. The chamber could not ignore it. Even Kale Draven felt the undeniable truth settle over him like gravity itself. The room was silent, but the lesson was clear. Fear had been replaced by awe. Power had been tempered by understanding. And the galaxy, for the first time, glimpsed what it truly meant for humanity to exist at the edge of everything they had ever feared. Outside the chamber, across the stars and through countless worlds, the message spread. The predator that had been declared unstoppable now had a name, a companion, and a master who did not wield it as a weapon but as a partner. And somewhere deep within the council, a grudging respect took root, seeded by fear and nurtured by inevitability. Elias stepped forward, head held high, and addressed the council one final time. You see a monster. We see a friend. You see destruction. We see loyalty. You see fear. We see humanity. That is the difference. Fluffy thumped its tail against the chamber floor one last time, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the walls, the seats, the minds of every observer. The predator sprawled onto the floor, exposing its massive belly as if to say the battle was over, but the lesson remained. The council, for all its power and authority, could only watch. They had been proven wrong, outmaneuvered not by fleets or weapons, but by trust, intelligence, and the simple, undeniable bond between a human and the galaxy's most feared creature. Kale Draven stepped back, shoulders sagging with relief and awe. He had seen the future, and it was terrifying and exhilarating. Humans had not simply survived the impossible. They had reshaped it. And in doing so, they had shown the galaxy what it meant to be unstoppable. Elias walked to the doors, Fluffy at his side. As they exited the chamber, the council remained in stunned silence, the echo of his words lingering like a promise. Fear was easy, loyalty was chosen, and humanity had already mastered what no one else could. Outside, the sun broke over the horizon, casting the chamber in a golden light. Elias and Fluffy moved forward together, a living testament to a bond stronger than armies, stronger than fear, and far more unstoppable than anything the council had ever imagined. The galaxy would remember this day. Not as the day the council declared a predator unstoppable, but as the day humanity called it Fluffy.